All right. So Cameron, I know that you have set yourself a goal of working towards eliminating the stigma attached to mental health issues, the silence surrounding this issue, and that you're prepared to share your own personal story to help people open the conversation.
Yeah, this is true. So I have a blog, which you might have found this video on my blog. It's cam.majorminor.ca. So Cam is my first name, major, minor with an er.ca. And I really wanted to open the door with this blog and show people that it can be talked about, and it's good to talk about mental health, and people should be comfortable speaking about mental health with their family, their friends, and their peers, and it shouldn't really have the stigma surrounding it where people should feel uncomfortable when mental health is brought up in a conversation. I feel like it should be a subject that everybody can talk about openly and be honest to themselves and others about, and I feel like that will help eliminate the stigma, but also help everybody kind of overcome these issues, treat these issues, and live more comfortably than they have before.
Okay. So if we were to kind of roll back the clock and talk about how you began your journey, that might be a good place for
Yes,
us to
so
start.
I do have a story to tell. I have experience with mental health. I have bipolar type 1, which on my blog there's a page called Bipolar Information, general information. It goes over the symptoms of both mania and depression, and bipolar is basically the extreme experience of both of those things. So at the upper level is mania, and at the lower level is depression. So my story starts in 2008. I had a bad car accident, really bad, and rolled my car several times into a fence according to witnesses, and it was really an indicator to myself and my family that I wasn't alright. And the reason is I was depressed. I was at a low place in my life. I really didn't have any hope for the future. I was in university and basically at the verge of dropping out. I ended up dropping out that at the end of that semester, which was April 2008. From there, I got help. My mom, had basically enough at that point and said, "We need to get you help." She, before that, had handed me a pamphlet that basically listed symptoms of depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I checked every box. I checked all the boxes. I felt it really did explain to me what depression was. I identified as being depressed. We went to the doctor. He prescribed meds. We started on an antidepressant. We started on a combination of medications to treat bipolar. I thought I was just maybe seasonal affective disorder or something. I was sad sometimes, happy sometimes. I had a bad reaction to the meds over that summer, and I came off them. But then I had the best summer of my life. I met a girl, I moved out, I bought a motorcycle, I started a job, and everything was great. And then my girlfriend went off to university, and I got bored pretty quickly. I wasn't too happy in my job. It was a great job, but it wasn't really a career. It was a job on Main Street, Newmarket, at tech support. And I was helpful there. I fixed computers. I helped people, buy electronics and stuff like that. But I was bored. So in September 2008, when we were getting the tail end of Hurricane Ike, I decided to race the weather to London, Ontario. So I got on my motorcycle. I drove pretty much as fast as the motorcycle would go all the way to London, and I hit the storm like a brick wall, and it was dangerous. And at the time, I was thrilled, and I can say that. I was excited. It didn't worry me too much. I knew how to handle my bike. I was still going as fast as I could, just trying to get out of the weather. I'm dodging trucks and cars that are going well below the speed limit, and it was dangerous. But I got to London. My girlfriend was surprised, not pleasantly surprised, more like, "Oh, I'm glad you're here, but what were you thinking? Why? Look at it outside; it's terrible." She's like, "We're getting a hurricane." I'm like, "This isn't a hurricane. Like, the States is getting the hurricane. We're getting the tail end." anyway, I spent the night with my girlfriend, and we had a fight, and it basically was unsure of our relationship status in the morning, and I got on my bike and left London. On the way home back to Newmarket, I kind of got lost, and I ended up at an airport, at Porter Airport, Toronto Island Airport, and I must have been contemplating leaving for no more than like half an hour. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to see what when the next plane's leaving, and nothing was going to the States that day, because especially in New York, it was just terrible weather from the night before. It was a beautiful day at this point where I was, though, and so I'm thinking to myself, I'll just go on a trip. Get on a plane to Montreal. I end up looking at the planes leaving Montreal. I'm like, I'll go to Vancouver, and I went to Vancouver. Went to Victoria via helicopter. I'm going to casinos. I'm going to spending nights in expensive hotels. I'm not sleeping the entire time. I'm very manic at this point, which is just excited, very energetic, very spontaneous, thoughts of grandiosity, just like the symptoms describe, and I'm just having the time of my life. So I'm in Vancouver. I run into some trouble. My dad gets contacted at some point, and obviously that's when it became an emergency for my family. I ended up getting escorted back to Ontario via, I forget the airline, but I had somebody with me the entire time. I was escorted onto the plane. I was monitored when we stopped in Kelowna. An off-duty police officer escorted me on that flight back to Ontario, and I was met by my dad and a uniformed officer. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is great. Like, my trip could be compromised right now, and I have a bodyguard here. I'm thinking to myself in a strange reality that isn't in reality, that I'm some sort of agent. I'd already ditched a lot of my belongings, like a memory card and a USB device. And in my mind, the scenario is totally different than what I realized after the fact. So I'm thinking to myself, great, I have a bodyguard, I have a private escort to my next location, which at that point, Dad had told me we're going to Grandma's for dinner. And so I'm expecting, okay, we're going to Grandma's for dinner, maybe my girlfriend will be there, we can reconcile, and on the way back to Newmarket, it became very obvious to my dad that we couldn't go to Grandma's for dinner. We had to go where my mom was, which was at South Lake. And I didn't really have a big problem with this, because the hospital is a safe place. They can treat you there. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna get a once-over, just make sure nothing's wrong with me. I had some altercations out in Vancouver, nothing major, but just it made sense to me in my mind that I would need to get checked out. So I talked to the doctor, who I thought was some sort of consultant, if you will, and I'm telling him like what's going on in my mind, and my parents are telling him, what symptoms I'm showing, and that's when everything just, became very controlled. So what happens is I got admitted to South Lake involuntarily. I ended up basically submitting, because there's no point in fighting. I knew there's no point in fighting the system. I was administered drugs against my will, kind of. I mean, I knew if I wasn't going to take them, they were going to force them to me. I ended up in solitary that night, which is basically a room to yourself. You have a room with a toilet in it, you have a bed, and you have none of your own belongings. And so they took everything. They took my clothes, my cell phone and wallet and watch and all that. So I'm admitted to South Lake Hospital in September 2008. And that was the journey. That's where the journey started, the journey to recovery and accepting, what had happened to me. Because at this point, I was very confused as to why I was being treated this way. I thought I was a very important person. I don't know at what point it switched to me gaining my sanity back. I'm sure the drugs had some sort of help with that, but after not sleeping for basically 3 or 4 days straight, I had just totally lost touch with reality. So they induced sleep. They gave me a drug that calmed my mind down. I probably slept for days. And, 3 weeks in solitary, which is, a room to yourself. You're let out during scheduled times. You eat at scheduled times. You have visitation at scheduled times. The doctors see you at scheduled times. The nurses monitor you on a schedule, and everything's very controlled. 3 weeks in solitary, then I moved to the group portion of the hospital where you have a roommate, and you have more freedom in that you can leave your room whenever you want. You can interact with other patients, but it's still not, I wouldn't call this a reality either. This is, people who have mental illness who obviously need to be treated. You need to be treated. Everybody, it's interesting in there, to say the least. After 4 weeks in the group portion of South Lake, I was admitted or transferred to Whitby Mental Health, which is now, I believe, Ontario Shores. Okay, so I spent 3 months in Ontario Shores, which is basically a rehabilitation program for people with mental illness. I learned a lot about bipolar. I learned a lot about how to treat it, how, what the symptoms were, and it just made sense. Over this course of 3 months, it made sense. But I was depressed again. Like, I had been given a lot of medications. It was a calculated experiment over the whole time of the 5 months total that I was in an institution. It's a calculated experiment. They give you a drug knowing what it should do to you, but they don't know exactly because every person's body makeup is different. And eventually we found a combination that worked, and it worked temporarily. I've had many med changes over the years, and it's always being tweaked and recalibrated and things like that. So after 3 months, I got out of Whitby at February time of 2009. And everything changed. My whole life from that point forward was going to be different. Luckily, my friends and family were very accepting. My close friends really understood because they knew me my whole life. I didn't feel shame or anything, but I wasn't quite as open as I am now about it either. I was very careful about who I told. I was very careful about what I told them. But then again, my friends were involved in this process. I called my friend Chris from the helipad landing in Victoria, saying, go to my mom's house, get my passport, we're going to California. And I think I called my buddy Jordan from the hotel room, being like, yo, I'm living the dream, I'm out west, what are you up to? He's like, dude, I'm in vet school, doing the same thing I was doing when you were here in Guelph. And my girlfriend too, she had no idea what I was doing the whole time. I think I called her once when I was in Vancouver, and then at some point my family let her and her family know what was going on. She visited me while I was in South Lake, and we saw each other a couple times when I was released on a pass from both South Lake and Whitby. But we ended up splitting up after I got out of Whitby, and we're still friends. We're still really good friends, but it just obviously wasn't meant to be. So that's basically the start of the story in a nutshell. And yeah.
So you mentioned that your life changed.
Yes.
So tell us how it is that, what is the context of the change of your life that has allowed you to move forward?
So I guess at first I was very much in denial. Even while I was being treated for it, I didn't quite believe that this was me. Like, I didn't understand bipolar at the time, and as I learned it, I kind of grasped it pretty quickly, but it really took changing my mindset about it in a way where I accepted it and acknowledged that I was bipolar and that it could be treated. And over the years, it took time. So from 2009 till now, it's been 7 years. So over 7 years, I've really grown as a person. I matured. I handle things differently now. I guess maturity really had a big part in it. I was in my early 20s when I was diagnosed, and I don't know. I don't feel like I was grown up enough to really grasp a mental health issue at that time. Not until living through it did I really begin to understand it better, understand myself better, and be able to talk about it openly over time.
So one of the things that we often hear is that people take their medication and they feel better, and then they think, I'm cured, I don't need to keep taking this medication.
And I have had that experience, and I've come off my medications before. It's never a good idea. You think it's a good idea because you're absolutely right. You think, okay, I'm better. I don't feel the symptoms anymore. I'm stable. I obviously don't need these drugs. So yeah, I'm just gonna get myself off them. It's not recommended because obviously, especially going off your drugs cold turkey, it just messes up everything. And you learn your lesson after the first couple times you do it. I know that now I need my medication, and if I'm not on my medication, I'm not gonna function properly. So I do take my medication as prescribed now. I'm honest about it. So I take Invega, which is a mood stabilizer / antipsychotic. I take 75 milligrams as an injectable every month. I also take a maintenance dose of Wellbutrin. I'm on a low dosage, 150 milligrams. Right now I'm only taking it every other day because I am in an upward mood. I'm bordering on mania, but I'd say I'm still very much in Hypo-Mania. I haven't lost touch with reality. And then I also use medical marijuana, and I am a medical user as of just recently. I went to a doctor, I explained my issues, and filled out paperwork, and now I'm approved to use medical marijuana. And that really helped. In the past decade, I've used marijuana on and off, and I always felt it helped me. When I'm down, it just boosts me up a bit, makes me feel a bit better. When I'm up, it calms me down and relaxes me enough that I can sleep. And just generally getting sleep is an issue for me when I'm at a point where my mind won't shut down. And marijuana really does calm down my mind enough so I can fall asleep. And when that doesn't work, I go on Ativan. So I have, as needed, 1 milligram or 2 milligrams, depending on how much sleep I think I can fit into my schedule. Which is funny, but so I usually take 1 milligram if I need to be up in the morning and do something. If I know I can sleep in and it doesn't matter what time I wake up, I'll take 2 milligrams of Ativan.
So I heard you say that you went off your medication more than once before you kind of accepted.
So the first time was in 2008. I explained that already. I didn't believe I was bipolar. And these medications that they give you, there's side effects and they're not pleasant. So when I say I came off my medications, it wasn't just like, I don't want to take medications. It was, my hands are sweaty. I'm having body irritations and rashes. There's a slew of side effects that I experienced, and it just made me feel uncomfortable being on these drugs. So I said to myself, look, it's either deal with the symptoms and take the drugs and believe that you need them, or in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, screw these medications that are making me feel this way and have these reactions. And so it took a couple times to learn that lesson that the symptoms can be managed, the side effects of the drugs can be managed, and you really do have to find a combination of medications that works for you. Like the ones I listed that I take might work for me, but not the next person. I tried lithium, I tried Seroquel, I tried other forms of medications. I just had bad reactions to them. So we crossed those ones off the list eventually, and now they're on my allergy list. So I know not to use those drugs with those ingredients. But I came off my drugs because of these reactions, and because I still hadn't come to terms with having bipolar, which a lot of people experience.
Well, I certainly am aware that this is quite common, and there's two things there. One, it's quite common for people to have that sense of I'm fixed, And the other thing is the reality of it taking some trial and error to find the right chemical balance for each individual.
So it is very much trial and error, and one would hope you eventually find a combination that works for you. I've heard of people treating bipolar without medications or pharmaceutical drugs. That works for them. They use fitness, naturopathic medications. I've heard of neuroplasticity, where doctors can treat the mind. I've heard of all these things. I haven't explored all of them myself. I know that the medications I'm on now are working for me right now. Not to say that I'll always be on these medications, because there is some pretty nasty long-term side effects of some of these medications. You take one of these drugs for a long time. I understand the antipsychotic medication, especially over a long duration of time, taking it at a steady dose, I can lose physical control over my body, which is pretty scary for me. So I think, it hasn't happened yet. I'm not there. I'm still in control of my motor functions, but it scares me to think that one day, just because I'm being treated for bipolar, I might lose other controls, So not only will I have no control over my mind, but now I'll have no control over my body. It's a scary thought. So I might explore one day, a more natural solution. But I totally understand why people think they're cured. You get medicated, you think you're cured. Unfortunately, there is no cure for bipolar or mental illness in general. Not saying there won't be one day, maybe there will. But as of right now, it's not a curable disorder. You will need treatment in some form or another forever. That includes seeing a psychiatrist or psychologist, a family doctor, therapist, or somebody in person. It requires you to take medication, or maybe natural medications work for some people. I don't know. I don't have experience with that, but I have heard of it. So some sort of treatment will be required forever to deal with mental illness. And I know, from personal experience, before I had accepted it, I wasn't ready to admit that I'm going to need a medication to function normally every day. I'm going to need to see a doctor on a regular basis and explain to him how I'm feeling all the time. And now I see it as, okay, I can go and just bounce a couple ideas off my psychiatrist. This is how I'm feeling, and this is how I'd like to feel. So can we switch up my medications so I can get to that point? Or, now in the past month, I've seen him again, and we added Ativan to my prescription list, so that if there's an occasion where I can't get to sleep, I have a medication that will allow me to sleep. And that's basically the only thing that will keep me from going insane is sleep. Once I start losing touch with reality, it often means I've not had enough sleep, and my mind is playing tricks on me, and I start thinking along these paths that aren't quite in line with everybody else's realities. So
it sounds though like you've come to a place where you feel empowered to take charge as you are feeling the changes in yourself.
I feel in control. I feel like as long as the control is left to me, I will be able to manage it. I know my family has concerns all the time, and it'll probably never go away, but I've had other hypomanic and manic episodes, so I'm trying to think of the timeline here. The last extreme episode I had would have been approximately 2 years ago, so 2014. We're now at the end of 2016. So approximately just over 2 years ago, December time, I was manic. I lost touch with reality again. I thought I had it under control, and so all I really needed was sleep. I tried to go to the hospital and get the medication to get sleep, but what they do is they give you one out of it and they send you home. I went with my sister to the hospital, they sent me home. I went to the hospital on my own, they sent me home. My mom, she encouraged me to go to the hospital. And then my dad took me to the hospital, and that's when I had lost control, because I kind of handed it over to my dad and let him take the steering wheel. And in his, mind, I needed to be in hospital, and I think he convinced the doctors and the staff there that I needed to be admitted. And again, I was admitted involuntarily. I went with the impression that I was going to see a doctor, get the medication I needed, and be sent home. That's not what happened. I ended up... So, fast forward to the part where I'm in a room with my dad. I've already given my dad my wallet. I still have my shoes, my clothes on. I have my watch and my cell phone, and I'm in a room. I've already seen a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, and all that. And my dad's trying to explain to me, like, you're gonna have to stay. And I wasn't on board with that. I had told him I had no intention of staying in this place. It's not a fun place to be. And at one point, he kind of looked at me. He walked out of the room. After I refused to give him my cell phone and my watch, and he walked out of the room, and 5 security guys came in and took my watch and my BlackBerry, and I have mixed feelings about that because I didn't resist. There's no point in fighting 5 security guards who are all like, they're wearing their getup, they have bulletproof vests on, they have gloves on, they look dangerous. Like, you don't want to mess with these guys. And I cursed at them, and I, told them off, and I was yelling, and I, tried to keep my watch on my cell phone as best I could, but I lost that fight. And then I was very uncooperative from that point forward. And there was no convincing me that I was supposed to be in hospital that day. I knew that all I needed was some sleep. But I ended up getting strapped to the bed by my arms and legs for overnight, and I fought it the entire time. I was yelling, I was, being a smartass, just comments. There's some funny stories involved in that night, just because it was a very long night. Fast forward to the morning, my psychiatrist finally comes to see me, and his reaction was, holy shit, like, how did it escalate to this? Why? He knows me. He knows I wasn't, a danger to anybody or myself. I'm not really a violent person. I wasn't going to fight with anybody, but I don't know what the word is, I guess, intimidating. I'm a pretty big guy. If I don't agree with something or somebody comes at me aggressively, I'm gonna fight for myself self-defensively. And I guess that was the only way they could control me that night, was to physically tie me down to the bed. And I knew in my mind I could have fought it. I could have got out of there if I put my mind to it. But at that point, I got the police chasing me. I got my dad chasing me and my mom chasing me, and I just knew the cycle wasn't going to end. So I guess I did this whole process to prove to my family that, I will do it, but it's not my first choice. So I was admitted. Again, I spent 3 weeks again. Just before the holidays in 2014. I got out a couple days before Christmas, and I was still in a good mood, surprisingly. They didn't cripple my spirit. And the 3 weeks in there were a long time, but I did go pretty much insane. The drugs that they gave me induced a psychosis again, and I did lose touch with reality several times. I blame the treatment. I don't think that I had reached that level of insanity until I was being treated in the hospital against my will. And then I get out Christmas time. It was a great Christmas. 2014 starts off great. 2015 at this point starts off great. But by February, March time, it was just downhill, and I crashed again. So, and then I say I was dysthymic for most of 2015. I wasn't the most depressed I'd ever been, but I think by March or April time, my family was concerned again for the opposite reason. I wasn't in that good mood at all. I was very sad, depressed. I wasn't showering. I had withdrawn from my friends and family. I was sleeping most of the day. We're talking like up to 20 hours a day I was in bed. I would get up to absolutely necessary, it's time to go to the bathroom, or ooh, I could have something to eat and then go back to bed. I'd watch a show or a movie and the cycle would start again. It was just, a cycle of sleep basically for a lot of that year. I guess at some point I received treatment again for depression. I started an antidepressant again, and it was this very slow, gradual climb out of the gutter again. So 2015 kind of passed by. We're now in 2016. 2016 has been a pretty good year as a whole, and now we're at the end of the year, and I've peaked again to a level where I'm bordering on. I don't want to say bordering, but I'm up there. Like, I'm in the clouds again. I am grounded. I think people would agree that I haven't started talking in a way that they don't understand. I'm not building a rocket ship trying to go to the moon. Although I had that experience in a jet plane a couple weeks ago, and those experiences just feed into my energy, and my experiences kind of feed into my confidence and the energy I give off. So it's you gotta take everything with a grain of salt, and you have to really be careful about how stimulated how stimulated I get, because I know that it can very easily get out of control.
So you've come to a place where you really feel like you are in control.
I do.
You can manage your circumstances, manage your health, and you've taken the courageous step of sharing your journey. What comes next for you?
It's a good question. I'm kind of in the mode where I'm looking for a career. So I took a course through Seneca, job training program. So I'm trying to get my foot in the door at a company that can really help me evolve into a person that can keep control and can, have some sort of career, income, lifestyle that is independent. I still at home. I'm still doing odd jobs / freelance / contract work, and it's good. It keeps me going month to month. But it's not freedom. It's not independence. I still rely on the government system for my drugs and an allowance for living expenses. And I don't want to rely on these things anymore. I'd like to, make my own path and do my own things. So what's next is hopefully get a job, or a career, not a job, and maintain control, maintain a level of confidence and happiness, really, to go after success and exceed in life. So I run a business, major, minor. I write a blog, Cam's Bipolar blog. I hope to keep those going this year. I just finished my business website the other day. Had a vision, got it done. So you can visit that at majorminor.ca. So I offer services, basically around technology, IT services, customer support services, web services, technology sales, and just general multimedia consulting. So I hope to have a successful 2017. I'm looking forward to it. I think Christmas is going to be good this year. I'm going away next March with the family, right over my birthday. So things are good. I hope they continue in a path that is good, and I don't hit the glass ceiling, as you will, and just I don't want to come back down again. But I know in a couple months I'll probably level off, and I know there will be a dip again, because it just seems to be the way the cycle goes. And just I hope to be prepared for it, so I don't spin out of control and lose the ground that I've made this year.
Well, I wish you every success with that, and I
thank you
know that you also are prepared to come and speak to groups or classrooms, share your experience, and I hope that you find the opportunity to do that more as the years go by.
That would be great. If anybody would like to contact me about that, they can email me at cameron@majorminor.ca. I have given presentations to classrooms before. I'd say my presentation's about an hour because there's some interaction there. Sometimes I get off on tangents and forget about what my purpose of speaking there is, but I try and make it an interactive experience. And I have had great feedback from that. Just the other day, I got an email from the professor that I spoke for at Seneca, in his class, and one of his students used or quoted me in their final project, and that's just, it feels great to get that feedback and know I've impacted them in a way that made an impression that they'll remember, and I guess the whole point of these presentations and these blog videos is to just show that people can talk about this subject in an open way, and it should be talked about in an open way, and people do need help. People who need help need to be able to talk about it and seek out the right support for them. So friends and family, check up on your loved ones, ask the difficult questions, and don't give in to the stigma. Don't feed the stigma by insulting people or treating them differently or any of those things. Be accepting, be open and honest, and hopefully we can help a lot of people in that way.
And that's a great place for us to call it a wrap.
Thank you. Yeah, good day.
Nice job, Cameron.
Thank you very much.